Well, hello and welcome to another episode of More Perfect Marketing. My name is David Baer, and if you are a regular listener to this program, you probably know that I like to talk a lot about something I call, everybody calls, in fact, direct response marketing. It's a means of being able to track exactly what message you're putting out there in the market and whether it's working on getting people into your business, saying, raising their hand saying, I'm interested in what you have to offer. And I will once in a while make fun of or complain about this other end of the spectrum in the advertising world, the one we refer to as Madison Avenue, the guys who we say are really interested in patting themselves on the backs and, winning awards, and that's it. But in fact, I have somebody here who probably is going to speak up in defense of that end of the marketing world, because there's actually some real important value to those elements in marketing as well. And since I know very little about it, we thought we would have Chris Ritter, who is the co-founder and the chief creative officer over at a creative agency known as C90, to come on and teach me a little bit, and hopefully teach you as well a little bit about the world of the creative end of marketing. Chris, welcome.
Hey, how are you?
All right. I hope I didn't offend you too much with that intro, but it's the way that I have often seen the marketing world. And, if we talk about the creativity that happens in brand marketing, some of it is somewhat bizarre and difficult to wrap your head around. Some of it is highly effective. And so, we sort of paint broad brushstrokes around, it's good or bad. And I don't mean to suggest that it's bad by any means, but like any marketing, including marketing that's direct response marketing, sometimes it's not very effective.
Yeah, I mean, I find, we like to say something because we see it as being actually really complementary of each other.
Yeah.
If you look at like the traditional, say, marketing funnel, as an example of, kind of a model of where we really fit together, you're further down the funnel. So we talk a lot about interest, because once a client or a customer or a consumer of some sort has interest, they need those direct responses. They need the email marketing. They need the things that are going to get them over the hump to purchase, right? But what we really specialize in is getting interest, which is a very difficult thing to do. Because people are, bombarded with so many messages all the time. You really have to stand out. And there's only a few different ways to do it. We like to say, if you're not interesting, you're just irrelevant. Because if you don't have interest or you don't gain interest, you can't sell anybody anything. So it's very important to get that, that top level, which is awareness, and get people excited about your brand and gain interest, so that, people like yourself can be more effective, actually.
Totally. And it makes total sense. If we go back, late 19th century, there was this concept that was created or identified called AIDA, ADIA, or AIDA, excuse me. The very first part of that formula is attention, right? So you're working on capturing the attention and then getting people interested in, okay, what is this brand all about? Or is this brand a fit for me? Or I want to learn more. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's precisely what I'm saying. We like to, use a little bit of different terminology, because it's always goes from, imagine your, audience is completely unaware of you or your brand or product or whatever. We have to gain awareness. And then once we gain awareness, we have to get interest. That's the world that we live in. And then, it funnels obviously down to purchase. But yeah, we're talking the same language.
So, I'm thinking about this in terms of the types of businesses where this applies in an obvious manner, and those where applies, but perhaps less obvious. So if we were talking before I hit record about some recognizable national or international brands, that obviously this makes a lot of sense because we want to indoctrinate the public into thinking about that brand whenever they think about, that product type or that category. But I'm imagining that it doesn't stop at large enterprise businesses.
Oh, definitely not. One of our big business sectors that we go after is startups,
Mhm.
for example. So, whenever you have a brand problem, there's only a certain amount of, ways that branding is actually a good solution for you. One of them is that you have nothing, nothing at
Mm.
all. So a lot of times when you're talking about startup, it's an idea, it's in its infancy, it needs to change. Maybe you're a couple of years old and you just got funding, but you need to kind of change, what you're really all about. It's up to us to take that sort of, the ideas that really drive your company, drive your customers, drive culture, and translate that into something that is, eye-catching, beautiful, and relatable, to everybody. So you have startups. Another reason is, you have a problem. You have a problem. Maybe you're just not converting to a new audience segment, or maybe there was a crisis, with the
Mhm.
brand. I worked with Livestrong, years ago, right after the Lance Armstrong scandal. So at the time, everybody was very familiar with, the yellow bracelets,
Mhm.
and very familiar with Livestrong as a consumer brand, but nobody actually knew what the mission of the nonprofit actually was, and that's navigating cancer patients through all their treatment, which is a much different, much richer story. And that's where they really had to do a strategic rebrand. We were instrumental and part of that process, on that particular project. And we had to think of something really different, and that's where you have to find new ways to really relate with people, and in that case, regain their interest.
Mhm. All right. Well, let's go back to the startup concept because I'm sort of curious about how the process works. And with a startup, you're not dealing with the public's existing awareness of a brand,
Right.
and so there's probably a series of things that you need to consider in order to sort of figure out what you're going to do visually, what you're going to do messaging wise, what you're going to do in terms of where they're communicating all of this. How do you work through that process?
Yeah, it's really starts on a very high level. We ask questions that are, it almost seems too high level, right? Right. So we have to, really think about what is their business? Why does this business even exist? Why do we put them there? And really look at the company and why are you here for consumers, and what makes you special? What do you do well? What do you maybe not do well? Then you have to look at their customer base. Who are we going after? Who's this message even for? Who cares?
Mhm.
Why would they care? Then you look at their competition. It doesn't matter if you're brand new in a category. You're always competing with people's dollars. So we have to do something that is different than what everybody else is doing to gain their attention, or at least not confuse people.
Mhm.
And lastly, and this is where I think a lot of the really interesting concepts come, is looking at culture. Where do you fit in culture? What are cultural trends that we know is going on a macro scale, that is relevant to who you are and what you are, the message that you're trying to put out to the public and get people interested.
So, I'm thinking about this, and we were talking earlier, before we started the interview about the college that I went to. I know that you've done work with at least in one other college that I see on your website, Northern Michigan University. Um, Things that might be happening around the world or in the consciousness of the audience that that school is trying to get in front of, maybe position themselves in a certain way visually, or the positioning in terms of what their strengths are, or that they are relevant, or that they're perhaps still relevant, what is the thinking that you sort of have to go through in developing, and I was perhaps using that one as a specific example, but if that's not a good one, you want to guide us through one that is a little bit more tangible.
Yeah, that's actually a really good example. So you're talking about Northern Michigan University, NMU, GS&R branding that we just launched. And Northern Michigan University is a really unique college, and a lot of it really has to do with their geographic location. It is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Mhm.
It is on the coast of Lake Superior, and it is gorgeous. It is a very, very beautiful natural setting, but it's also 3 hours away from a city with 100,000 people. It's very remote, and it is cold and snowy. It gets about 150 inches of snow in Marquette, where it is every single year. So we had to really relate, to this unique situation that they have, and who's going to want to do that. Who's going to because it's a hurdle. We did some interviews with some of their current students, undergrad and graduate, and they told us very plain and clear, if you're from a southern state like Georgia and you're not used to snow, it's going to be a problem, or if you really don't like winters, it's going to be a problem. So that's obviously a hurdle that we had to get through. So one of the things that we did some research on and really started to think about, well, how could this be beneficial for somebody? And the remoteness was the thing that really came forward. One of the things that really came forward for us. So people, as you probably know, are as stressed out as ever. Depression is a huge thing, across the United States workforce, and particularly in students, and even more particularly in graduate students, which is who we're trying to attract. So when you kind of put that all together, the idea of, leaving the rat race, because a lot of these people are already professionals, to go to a remote location that is pristine wilderness, to take the time and learn something new that's going to benefit themselves personally, is a really relevant message for these people. And that was one of the places that we landed and just said, okay, well, if you're going to do something that, allows you to be pure in thought, and eliminate all the distractions of, the workplace or the busy city, this is the place for you. So that's a really clear way that we can connect, what some people might even see as an issue or a problem, and turn it into a positive that's actually going to attract people to go there. So we actually wrote some headlines for them, say that, people come here for the unlimited headspace, which seems like a really peaceful place for people to go and get educated and learn new things. So that's just one example, right?
And yeah, I'm looking at it on your website now. There's a very strong visual that's accompanying that text that you just mentioned. I don't know if you recall what it is, but it looks to me like right up against the shore, quite icy texture to it. So really gives a feel for what, whether that's actually that location or just sort of a suggestion of what, the interpretation of somebody, might be thinking about that environment when they look at this image. How did you come up with the way that you were going to express this visually?
Well, I mean, I think it's a really accurate representation, first off, of what you're going to experience while you're there. And when you're doing design work, you always have to think of, what's an authentic message? What's something that we can actually be, say authentically in a way that is true to ourselves. And I think that's an image that really tells you it's cold here. It's beautiful. I mean, that's a very, very peaceful image that you're referencing. It's like almost infinite, infinite peacefulness all the way to the horizon. And, maybe there's a couple of fluffy clouds in there. But that idea of the sereneness of that, I think is really indicative of what the experience you're going to get, getting an education in Northern Michigan is going to be like.
Yeah, totally. I'm now fascinated by it, and now I have to go to the UP to discover it myself. So cool. So I'm thinking a little bit about the types of businesses that I tend to work with, which are, small local businesses, and how this stuff that we've been talking about applies to sort of the average business that's focusing on a local market, and they're not necessarily thinking about, having big billboards and all of the types of, big brand stuff that, Coca-Cola or Budweiser has a budget for and local businesses don't. How does this apply to a smaller, more focused business?
Yeah, that's a good question actually, because a lot of times when you think of awareness, and you mentioned like Coca-Cola, right? They spend almost all of their money on awareness, because all you really need to do is say Coca-Cola, and now suddenly it's like, I want a red can in my hand, right? you know, and obviously, if you are, a mom and pop boutique, maybe a fashion boutique or something like that, you're never going to have that luxury, of having that amount of awareness. So, what you do is you isolate your audience, so who are you actually trying to get in front of? Coke is trying to essentially market to the entire world,
Yep.
so their audience is 8 billion people. Your
Well,
audience might not
there
only need to be 100,000.
there's another company that I think you've worked with. You've worked with my neighbors down the road, Nike, and I remember a friend of mine who worked there told me one day that one of their stated goals to all of their employees is to make sure that at least once a day, everybody on the planet sees the Nike swoosh.
That's an interesting one. I haven't heard
Yeah.
that one before, actually, but that's a legitimate goal for a large company. And once you get brand awareness, and Nike is a great example of this. Once you get kind of saturation, you can use your brand to support different things. Most people have seen the campaigns around Colin Kaepernick or Serena Williams.
Hmm.
For example, not every brand even has that opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And some people, especially with the Kaepernick campaign, said, "Hey, maybe Nike's not the brand for me." And Nike was comfortable doing it because they have the values of the
Yeah.
company that they really believe in. So, when you have that awareness, it actually kind of puts you into a leadership, kind of situation where you can be a part of the cultural zeitgeist.
Hmm. Okay, so I interrupted you. You were starting to talk a little bit about the mom and pop and about the focused or narrowed target. How do you do that effectively?
Right. So, I mean, the medium just changes. So I mean, obviously, you're not going to be doing a worldwide, billboard campaign, or you're not going to be on the pages of the New York Times or whatever if you're a small mom and pop shop. So, what do you do to make yourself really attractive, on a smaller scale? Perhaps it is getting people interested on Instagram. Perhaps it is really taking time and effort to make a fantastic experience. Maybe you're a restaurant, for example. Have a fantastic experience when you sit down. Show the food in really interesting ways. Have a great website. Have menus that people care about. Be cognitive of all the experiences that you have within the restaurant. And this is very design focused types of things, because when you have a great experience that's design led, word of mouth is a really, one, it's free.
Hmm.
And two, it's one of the most effective ways to actually spread your word is word of mouth. So giving people a really great experience, it's just that's just one way to do it, where you don't have to spend $1 billion of media
Yeah.
to achieve something that's really interesting and fun and people care about. Small brands get tons and tons of passion all the time, and it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort. And sometimes, like I started to say before, you don't have to market to 8 billion people. You can market to 100,000 people and really get your message out to the people who are going to matter to you.
Hmm.
Are you a local restaurant? Well, you might only need a very targeted approach towards a small amount of people, and it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to get your message out to those people.
So you bring up design, and I want to dig into this a little bit because you have a background in art and design, and I'm curious to know what brought you into the marketing advertising world to begin with.
Yeah, so my degree is actually in art with a graphic design focus. So the diploma says art, and I learned how to really think very creatively about problem solving,
Mhm.
especially when I was in college. So the first thing that I actually found straight out of college was, innovation. So I was the kind of student when I was building a portfolio where I was doing a lot of things by hand. I still illustrate a lot with collage and things like that. So it's a little bit of a non-traditional design portfolio coming out of college. But there's definitely a lot of thought that goes into my work. There's definitely a lot of things that are highly considered to tell a message.
Mhm.
And what that related, to me, or what related me to innovation is just careful thinking and portraying things in new ways. And my first, couple jobs was very much consumer centric innovation, working with companies like Procter and Gamble or General Electric. Nike was one of them. I did some innovation work with them. And from that, I always kind of wanted to say, okay, what does this really look like in real life? So kind of took the idea of the innovation thinking and said, well, what's the best way to use this type of thought and put it into real life and design things? And the answer to that, for me was, get into branding.
Mhm.
So I always like to tell people, so there's three partners here at C90. We have a chief strategy officer. I'm a chief creative officer, and we have another chief creative officer. And the way that we signify between the two CCOs is he's very executional, and I sit perfectly in between the partners. I'm really good at taking a strategy and making it into a visual language that's beautiful and really tells a story for somebody. So that's kind of how I ended up there. I mean, I'm you know essentially going through about 15 years
Yeah.
in a couple of minutes. But yeah, when I landed on branding, I think I found the thing that I'm just hyper passionate about.
So you were talking about the makeup of the team there, and I'm sort of interested in understanding the process. I mean, for anybody who's watched Mad Men, for example, where a client is sort of pitched, they're handed the business, and then there's like seemingly no communication with clients, and I can't imagine that that's how it actually works. How does it work?
Yeah, there's a lot of communication with clients every day. So we're a small agency. There's actually seven of us, but we're pretty much location agnostic. We have three people here in Cincinnati full time, and then we have a presence in Brooklyn, and we also have a presence in Miami. So in Miami, we actually that's our chief brand officer, and she's working very closely with clients every day to say, okay, what's your problems? What are kind of things that we can help solve, for you? So she has a lot of very um, deep relationships with, a lot of our clients, and that's what brings things to our attention,
Mhm.
brings projects, together and that sort of thing. And then once it, kind of goes over the line, we have strategy. We're a strategy led organization. We always start with, particularly in a visual identity or a brand project, we always position the brand. And that's where, I'm talked earlier about, the company, the consumer, the, competition and what goes on in culture. That's essentially positioning your brand.
Yeah.
And then once you have everything positioned, you create a design brief to say what are the messages that we want to portray visually. And then, I come into play, or my partner Emmett comes into play, where we give you all the creative assets that you need, language. We give you, pretty much a whole messaging strategy, with our deliverables, and say, these are the key images, these are the key messages that you can use going forward. And then, there's obviously implementation after that, where, we're creating the things that make you real. Maybe it's packaging, maybe it's a website, could be advertising campaigns, could be, any number of things, but we do all the design work as well.
And you mentioned earlier about the particular medium or channels that small versus big might be using. How does that come into play when you're sort of going through the process you've just described? Do you know where you're going to be communicating with prospective, customers at the point that you're in the creative process?
It's normally in the creative process where we start to figure it out. So when you position yourself and you really understand who your customer is, you can start to make a few assumptions of, okay, if our customer is this, they probably live here. You have to meet them where they're at. If you're looking for people who are looking for a restaurant in Cincinnati, you can't, run a billboard campaign in Arizona. So you have to figure out, where they're going to be at. And then once you figure out where they're going to be at, that's when you can start to create, okay, they're here. This is the problem that we have. How do you connect that in a really, interesting way? That mostly comes through around the design process, because then we can, especially if you're a fresh brand, we can at least start to think about, okay, well, this is what your design is going to look like. Maybe this would be appropriate as, I don't know, an Instagram campaign, or maybe this would be appropriate as a billboard campaign, or, you can go on. I mean, obviously, when you have different messages, some medium are better for others than other medium, and you have to just kind of figure that out as you go along.
Yeah. So you've been doing this work for a while, but the internet has existed for the majority of the time that you've been, in this space. And I imagine it's gained an increasing amount of footprint in terms of where a lot of these communications happen. What is your just general assessment of kind of where dollars get spent the most, and are you seeing trends in one direction or another, moving, even more digital, or retreating and going back, or does it depend on, the project?
Well, I mean, we always like to say, like, the right medium for the message is where we would recommend, spending money, right? That obviously changes every time. But, to give you kind of a more general answer, most people come to us and say, I need a digital marketing campaign, so it's like they come to the table with a solution before they ever think about what they're trying to say. Which, for me, I take that, with a grain of salt and say, okay, well, what are you trying to do? Maybe doing a bunch of Instagram ads is not the best technique to get this message across. So like a lot of people just say, oh, well, we're going to spend a whole bunch of money on social media. It's not always effective. It's very flooded. I don't know if, you like flipping through your Instagram, but boy, there's a lot of ads on there these days, and, they're doing well from an ad revenue standpoint. That's for sure. Yeah. But it's kind of like the de facto, in a way. And then the other thing that we seem to be seeing quite a bit is the idea of, launching a brand in the D2C space, that's very much like website focused. And obviously you see a lot of, companies that are doing this. There's tons of brands popping up that are doing it really well. Probably still the darling of, marketing right now, as far as D2C goes, maybe Casper. They've done tons and tons and tons of advertising to promote their product, and, they're a wildly successful company. But it takes a lot to get there. So people think like, oh, well, they can do it, I can do it. All I have to do is like a bunch of ads and have a great message. Really difficult to do.
I will mention, I was just up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and they had a retail store, Casper. And my wife and daughter were with me. And my daughter comes in and she wanted to try out some of the mattresses. And then she proceeded to ask them about the ads that she had seen, but she was actually identifying the purple ads, not the Casper ads. Luckily, the people in the store had no idea what she was talking about, but I'm not sure how effective the Casper campaign has been, at least in her demographic of 12-year-old girls in in the Pacific Northwest.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I can tell you that it's absolutely been effective in growing a lot more competition in the mattress world.
Yeah.
I mean, couldn't you just get like mattresses on President's Day for half price? I mean, that's all I remember, especially like before Casper.
Yeah, totally. Well, this has been fascinating, and to be honest, at the beginning of the conversation, I did you a disservice by painting a picture of the branding world in a negative light, and clearly, you're a practitioner of something that is quite different from what I imagined a lot of the branding and creative agency space is, and so thanks for sort of opening my eyes to the very thoughtful approach that you take to the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of fun.
Indeed. Why don't we chat very briefly about C90 and the types of clients you serve and where people can find out more about you there?
Yeah, so we're C90, and you can definitely find us at c-90.com online. That's our website. And then C_90 studio on Instagram. We like to tell people that, we work with, businesses of all different shapes and sizes, but we're definitely looking for companies that need a co-conspirator to, create something that, kind of bashes the status quo and creates something that's truly new. And that's the type of people that we're looking to work with.
Well, it's a cool website. There's some really striking visuals and some great detail on some of the work that you do, and some links to some cool video interviews that I watched as well. I will make sure that we have links to C90 for those who are interested in heading on over there. Chris Ritter, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Indeed, folks, this has been More Perfect Marketing. If you know somebody who could benefit from listening to this episode, please pass it on to them. And if you have feedback for us, please leave it over at Apple Podcasts. We greatly appreciate your reviews. Until next time, I'm David Baer, and this is More Perfect Marketing. Take care.